What's going on, guys? It's Steele from FLC, and I know it's been about almost a year since our last video, but who's counting? And today I really wanted to resurrect the channel, and what better way than taking an ultimate car like the F12 TDF here to the rooftop of a garage. Now, we got some nice views behind us, but I think that this car really takes the cake for me. Really one of my top 5 favorite cars of all time. I remember seeing this car about 10 years ago with those press photos, and I fell in love instantly. This particular car is in a beautiful spec, which I will get to later on in the video, but I thought I'd backtrack a little bit about the making of this car. So originating, the 250 TDF is the car this kind of was somewhat based on. TDF meaning Tour de France. In my opinion, it means too damn fast, because that's really what this car is. But that car came about 70 years ago, back in the 50s, but it was actually a very successful car for the Ferrari brand. Basically every endurance race that car was in, it beat everybody, and they really took some inspiration from that car and put it into this car. Just like the 430 Scuderia and the 458 Speciale, where those are street cars really converted into track cars to make really the ultimate version of themselves. This car is really the opposite. So it's a track car converted into a street car, just like the 250 TDF, where that was a real track car that really was on the road for the Tour de France races. And the reason I say that is because they literally took parts out of the race cars and shoved them into this car. And something else that I've noticed is actually right behind the windows, there is a plastic little aerodynamic lip. And if you look at pictures of a 599XX, they actually share something in common, in my opinion. Maybe a coincidence. That car has a little carbon fiber winglet, much more aggressive than this car, but I feel like it was just something cool that I noticed. So talking about the body panels of this car, they basically changed every single one on this car. Starting off with the front, they chopped off the front, basically leaving you with 2/3 of a front splitter, but I think it just looks so good on this car, as well as these carbon fiber little fins that pop up. You definitely do not want to hit one of those. These 2 carbon fiber air intakes that tie so well with that giant front grille that just feed air right through the nostrils and the hood, down to the side of the car, through the holes in the fenders, and then just go all across the fish gills over the rear quarter panel. But if I backtrack a little bit right towards these fender arches, yes, it's a little bit longer than a normal F12 Berlinetta, but this entire piece right here is in carbon fiber. And actually behind it, there is little canards that Ferrari incorporated to diversify the air a little bit more. Just goes to show the attention to detail that Ferrari goes. And even the door handles right here are finished in carbon fiber. I know that is not a specific thing to TDS, but it's just another cool thing that I saw. And coming down here to these unreal looking side skirts, by the way, they're in carbon fiber. That was a $10,000 option, but they must work pretty well considering how aggressive the rear end of it looks, as well as maybe being able to cool the brakes. But if you guys come up here, it's probably the most prominent thing on this car, which are these louvers right here. Not only are they there to commemorate the 275 GTB and the 250 TDF, but actually serve a purpose. So this car being able to do well over 200 miles an hour, there is a lot of pressure buildup in the fender wells. So having these louvers here actually releases all the pressure that the car has. And just above it, if you look at the back deck lid glass, it is completely redesigned compared to a normal F12. I do not want to know how much that costs to replace, but it looks pretty cool. And finally, coming to the rear end of the car, down to this rectangular type of thing at the bottom with a bunch of lights on it. That is actually the fog lights that the car has. In Europe, it is a very big deal. In the US, not so much, but Ferrari did a very good job at designing it for these cars because it resembles just like their F1 cars. And right underneath it, they actually incorporated the backup camera. Thankfully, they did that because it did not want to mess up the carbon fiber bumper down there with an ugly backup camera, which brings me to my next point, which is the fact this whole rear end is completely redesigned for the TDF. That beautiful rear diffuser on the bottom, and actually underneath it are some active aero bits that open and close depending how fast you're going or how hard you're braking. These new casings for the exhaust system, obviously finished in carbon fiber, and this beautiful carbon fiber strip between the taillights. I don't know why they did it, but I think it looks awesome. And actually there's a little Italian metal flag right here for just over $1,000 on the trunk lid. And coming down here to the diamond cut wheels, they aren't necessarily an option, but it brings me to another point, which is the fact this car has 275 front tires compared to the 255s on a normal F12 Berlinetta, allowing this car to have a lethal amount of traction when it's going around the track. But doing that actually makes the rear end go out so much, just because there was so much grip in the front that Ferrari had to introduce rear wheel steering on this car for the first time. Turns the back wheels ever so slightly. And now talking about the spec of the car, and probably one of my favorite things to do, which is talk about the options. So on these TDFs, you can get pretty crazy with the options. It can get quite expensive quite quickly. This car is no exception, having almost $131,000 in extra options. It's finished here in Grigio Ferro with the Nero and Rosso Corsa stripe. I think that is mandatory on these TDFs. It looks so good on this car specifically. A couple $1,000 option for that, but backtracking a little bit to the color. Grigio Ferro first introduced in the 50s on the 250 GT. I've never been a big fan of gray, but I think it looks awesome on this car. But now let me show you guys the interior, because that's where you're gonna be spending most of your time. So now we're sitting inside the cockpit with this beautiful leather interior. Not exactly sure what it's called. I'm just gonna put it right here. I'm gonna call it tan with a nice Rosso and Nero accents. But on these special edition Ferraris, what you're gonna see a lot of is the matte carbon fiber use and Alcantara use. It's actually an option in these special edition cars to get the leather interior, which is kind of weird because on a normal F12, the leather comes standard and the Alcantara is an option. But actually something on these special edition cars that would be a lot of money on a normal car is the use of this Technic material. It was made in conjunction with NASA actually, and it surrounds the whole bottom of the car. And actually underneath the floor mats right here, you're gonna see it has this kind of metal finish, and they've been starting to use that in all the special editions in the newer Ferraris. Some other cool things in the interior you're going to see is actually there's a plaque behind the seats that lets you know you're driving a limited edition car, one of 799 for the world. The little gear selector here, I don't really know what it's called and why they use it in these special edition, but it just looks pretty cool to me. Passenger display, so for the passengers, they can see how fast you're going. If you wanted to go 211 miles an hour, you can, because that is the top speed of this car. And the steering wheel right here with all your buttons on it can be kind of confusing when you first get in the car, but once you've been using it for a while, it is pretty simple to use. You got your Manatino down here, which tells you the different driving modes you can do. Wet, that's self-explanatory. Sport, which is basically the comfort mode for the car, but obviously they're not going to put that in this car. Race, which is the sport mode. CT off, turns off some of the computers in the car, makes you have a little fun with the car. You can drift it a little bit. And ESC off, I've yet to get that far. That's a little scary for me because that turns off everything. Rear wheel drive, no traction, something you don't really want to touch that much. And something else on the steering wheel you get is these conveniently placed horns for your thumbs and this engine start button. I wonder what that does. And oh yeah, this car's got a 6.3 liter V12 with the aspirations of being natural. And if you look at the engine bay right here, it is completely finished in carbon fiber, which was an $11,000 option. But that's not even the coolest feature, because if you look at the front here, it's signed by two legendary F1 drivers, Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen. And at the time of this car coming out, you could option for their signatures under your bonnet. And even it's signed by Piero Ferrari, which is the son of Enzo Ferrari himself. And since we're up here, this car is carbon fiber headlights, $6,000 option. But going back to the motor, compared to a normal F12 Berlina that has 730 horsepower, this car's got 770 horsepower. That's over 100 more than the 599 GTO. And everybody thought this was gonna be the last naturally aspirated V12. And then they came out with the A12, and then they came out with an A12 GTS, and everyone thought that that was going to be it. Then they came out with the A12 Comp and Comp A, and now the 12-cylinder, and I don't even want to get into the SUV that they got coming out. But backtracking a little bit to when I said earlier that this car has parts from the XX program, more specifically the 59XX, the hydraulic tappets, which actually allow this car to rev easier and actually a little bit higher compared to our normal Ferrari F12 Berlina. The revs to about 8,200 RPMs. This car can now rev to 9,000 RPMs and sounds like this. And in my opinion, this is peak Ferrari right here. Checks off every box. Beautiful body lines, amazing sound, very simplistic interior, and how can you hate this V12 motor underneath the bonnet? If you guys want some more information on this car, feel free to shoot us a message on our socials, email, or if you guys want to give us a call at 954-332-7600, you can do that as well. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Share it with a friend if you enjoyed it, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because we got some really cool content coming for you guys soon.